I'm just at a fun angle today. That's okay. Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kayla and I like to talk about books. Today I thought it would be kind of fun, since it's sort of the end of the year holiday time, to talk about some of the books I read in 2021, specifically like some of my favorite books. I kind of considered doing another video, maybe talking about some of my least favorite books, but that just feels so negative, and I don't know that I have a lot of books that I read that I really hated. Usually if I truly don't like a book, I just stop reading it, but I do have one book that I really didn't like, but I felt the need to finish because I kind of had to know how it turned out, but I really didn't like it. So I might touch on that a little bit, but mostly this is actually going to be just about the books that I read that I liked kind of a lot. Sort of books too that like surprised me with how much I liked them a little bit. So yeah, I just kind of want to talk about that. If you're interested in that, then definitely keep watching. If not, that's okay. Not offended. Let's go ahead and get started. I think that the first book that I just have to talk about because I loved it so much is Billy Summers by Stephen King. And I did a full dedicated review on this, talked about it a lot in depth, so I'll leave a link to that as well. But to be honest, this book just blew me away. It's my favorite thing I've ever read by him still. Like, I've even read others since. I plan to read more in the next year, in the new year, of Stephen King books I haven't read before, but of the ones I've read, this was hands down my absolute favorite. I just loved, I think that it took you on a really long extended journey. I love all of the allusions and the references to The Shining in it. I love the setting and how it starts off on like the East Coast and then it goes to Colorado. I love the character Billy Summers. I think he's a really interesting character. And I thought the story was really great. I actually find that a lot of the Stephen King books I enjoy the most are the ones that have either more subtle supernatural elements or are just more like kind of mystery thriller based, but there were like a couple very subtle supernatural, like I said, the kind of nods and references to The Shining. And I also just loved the ending. I don't know if I should talk about it a lot with like spoilers and stuff, but I just loved the way it wrapped up in the ending. It was obviously really emotional, but I absolutely have that as the top of my favorite. It's my favorite thing that I've ever read by Stephen King. And I feel like it would take something pretty phenomenal to unseat it, to be totally honest with you. It sort of just had everything. And I love the way it started off as like there were almost multiple climaxes. It really built like this and then like this and then like this. I just loved that. I really thought the resolution was well done. The whole thing, start to finish, was incredible. I think my #1 top read of the year. So I would highly recommend it, and it stands out still at the end of the year as probably the best thing that I read. So #2 on my favorite book list of the year was The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. I've actually never read anything by John Green before. This was the first time I'd read anything by John Green, and I actually really enjoyed it. I loved the kind of bite-sized chunks that he delivered all these things in. I loved that it kind of just felt almost journalistic in a way, like journaling, but not quite. It was definitely more polished than that. It was kind of just his thoughts on various topics, and he rates them, and I don't even remember. There were so many different topics. It's like sunsets, teddy bears, just everything from things that are kind of controversial, things that are really simple. Even he talks about like where he lives and like when they moved there and all these different things that apparently he also talks about on his podcast of the same name, which I've never listened to. This is the first John Green media that I'd ever consumed because I'm not really into like the young adult stuff as much, but it does make me think that maybe I should give his podcast and perhaps some of his other books a shot. Like I said, the young adult isn't really my thing, but you can tell that he has just a great brain, sharp wit, but it's not overpowering in the book. It definitely isn't like too snarky by any means. There are some really heartfelt moments as well, some really heartfelt observations, And I just love that about it. So that was probably my next favorite book, and I just really highly recommend it. I think too, he discusses a lot of things regarding our current society, the digital age, all of these different complex kind of topics that are just interesting to get your brain churning about. So I would definitely recommend it to a lot of people because of that. I think that it's very relevant. They're not the same at all, but it vaguely reminds me of Matt Haig's Notes on a Nervous Planet, which was a little bit more bleak, I think, but I think both of those are interesting commentaries and observations on like our current world that we're living in. But I think John Green's, to be honest with you, was just a little bit more uplifting. I think it had a very optimistic tone, and I liked when he talked about especially his like climate anxiety, because that is something that personally I've dealt with a lot. And it sounds so silly to say, but reading about his climate anxiety and how he deals with that actually helped me deal with my own like a lot more than I would have anticipated from literally just reading a book. I just can't believe that literally just reading a book helped that much, but it did. Highly recommend it. 5 stars, 4 stars. I don't remember what I gave it, but definitely up there with very high star rating, and would recommend it to a lot of people. So the next book that I really enjoyed that was a huge surprise to me this year was Chronicle of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And this was just a complete shock to me because it was like a random pick from a little free library near me, and I think I vlogged reading it, and if I did, I'll leave a link to that. But I just picked that up. I thought it sounded kind of cool, and I got into it, and wow, what an amazing story. I love the pacing of it, and there's just this weird feeling. So as you might know by the title, like Chronicle of a Death Foretold, this guy, like everybody knows that he's gonna die in this village, and so it's really weird and interesting to see the whole story of him like walking through his village and everyone knows he's gonna die, and all of that leading up to it. It's just really well written, super interesting, and it's short. It's a novella, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it had beautifully descriptive writing, just what a unique concept for a little story, and great, just a great one to pop in to a bag and really escape. It was a really interesting, like, you delved into this world. So I would definitely recommend that. I'll try and find, I think I did vlog it like I said, so I'll try and find a link to that and post that as well. But that was a highlight of my reading year for sure. It still stands out at the end of the year as one of my favorite reads of the whole year. The next book, I don't know why I'm holding up a 2. I think this is number 4. The next book that I really enjoyed reading in 2021 was a super recent read, and it was an Andy Carpenter mystery, and it was one of the Christmas themed ones called Deck the Hounds. And I don't know why this hit a little bit different even than other Andy Carpenter mysteries, which I already like. They're like a weird little thing that I got into when I was pregnant. I don't know, it was really funny, or like kind of postpartum. But I really liked this one a lot. I think the added festivity, but also it seems like it was more complex than some of the other ones I've read. So it was really interesting that it was interspersed with random moments of a seemingly unrelated or like side story that did ultimately tie into the mystery in the end. I just really liked that it was definitely a little bit more layered and super festive, and you just gotta love a good dog holiday title pun. David Rosenfeld is the best at those. The Andy Carpenter mysteries have some of the best. I'm literally reading another one right now. It's called Dachshund Through the Snow. Like, are you kidding me? That's hilarious. That's so funny and so cute. And again, another really fun mystery, but I might talk about that in another video. Who knows? But I definitely liked Deck the Hounds more than I thought I would. It ended up being just like really interesting, like a really just fun read. So that's rated up there for me. The last book that I'll talk about that I really enjoyed is A Carnival of Snackery by David Sedaris. Again, this is one that was released this year actually. So a lot of the books that I really enjoyed were actually released this year, which doesn't usually happen for me. I'm not always like on top of the new hip stuff. But apparently this year I was. I definitely really enjoyed a carnival of snackery. I'm still picking it up and putting it down. I'm actually not fully done with it yet, but I've loved it so much. I know it's going to be a favorite of mine. I'm such a David Sedaris fan, and it is a pick up, put down book. So I think I'm like 2/3 of the way through. I pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. Love it. It's just funny, humorous little observations by David Sedaris, and because it's his journals, it feels a little bit more off the cuff, which he actually does really, really well with. He's just got a mind. He's just got a hilarious observational writer's mind. I love David Sedaris. This collection is another stellar masterpiece. Never disappoints. Honestly, just always one of my favorite reads. If a David Sedaris book is released, I'm so excited to get it, and I'm so happy to read it, and they're always just... I'm gonna kind of end this video on a negative note, and I don't know why I'm doing it this way, because this is just completely off the cuff and not really very planned. But I'm gonna talk about the one book that I really didn't like, which is People Like Her by Ellery Lloyd. And this was a book of the month pick that kind of sounded like an interesting concept. It's about like one of those Instagram moms, kind of social media moms, and she is being stalked by somebody, and then like one of her kids gets taken. But I hated it, to be totally honest. I had to read to the end to make sure that the baby was okay, because the baby was in danger, and I was like 3 months postpartum when I read this, which was a huge mistake because I had so many hormones surging through my body. I had my own tiny baby in my arms a lot of the time when I was reading this, and it was a very stressful, very emotional, like I didn't like it. It was too much. It was really intense. It should have probably had like a very clear warning. And I know that sounds, I'm not normally one of those trigger warning people, but this was like not an okay book to read, I think, if you're pregnant or postpartum. And I was also dealing with like postpartum anxiety, which not a lot of people talk about, but it's kind of like postpartum depression except postpartum anxiety. And reading this with postpartum anxiety, honestly, I was not okay. And I will just tell a lot of people who are moms, like, just don't read this book. Don't read it. It's horrifying. It is just terrifying. Everything kind of turns out okay, I guess, in the end, but there's just so many parts where they reference like really horrible things, and you have to like read about this baby crying and nobody can comfort it because it's just really upsetting. I don't even want to talk about it anymore, but I did do a dedicated review on it that I think ended up being like a really ranty hate review, so if you want to watch that, go ahead and watch that. But I would advise against reading the book. I read a lot of really good books this year, but these were just some of the kind of standout ones to me. More the ones that were almost like a surprise. They were kind of surprise favorites. And when I just look back at my whole year of reading in review, these are the ones that stand out the most to me. These are the ones that I really, really enjoyed, except for People Like Her. Let me know below, what were some of your favorite books that you read this year? What were some books you didn't like that much that you read this year? And did you read any of these books? I'd be really curious to know, to be totally honest with you. And I'm just really looking forward to a new year of reading in 2022. There's some cool books that I think are going to be released, and some books that are not new releases that I'm excited to crack into. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, please subscribe. I will see you later.